started that.
Hello. It's a little. Hi, everybody. I can see you on screen. Hi.
Okay, I'm muting. Yeah, I muted your mic, and that worked. Since your audio will come through the microphone.
Yes.
Yes. I can't.
Very good.
I didn't hear what he said.
I want to check with the microphone. It's not. I don't know if it's. I don't know how to turn it on. Okay. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we're working. We got it.
Great. Actually, to go. Please get snacks.
Sure.
We're offering our physical attendants to get refreshments at this time, and then we'll begin momentarily.
We're set. And no. Oh, great. That's lovely. Hi.
Hello.
You're just starting. Have like a stand or something to put, but we'll their indication of why people should have their own copy. Thanks everyone on Zoom. We are about to started. Good evening, the UK. Good morning on the West Coast. Good afternoon on the East Coast.
Right. And it's early evening here in the UK.
Gosh.
Who's supposed to start?
I'm supposed to start. Yeah. I'm hoping people can hear me okay. I'm Andre Carrington. I direct the Speculative Fiction.
Hi, Andre. Nice to see you.
Nice to virtually meet you. It's so good to be virtually met from like multiple time zones. We're here to talk about Melinda Gebbie's Greatest Fits, which is a retrospective art book displaying work from throughout the career of cartoonist, painter, drawing artist. I don't know what the verb is. Errand for that. Melinda Gebbie, veteran of the feminist women's comics movement and underground comics, and just lifelong.
Are we having trouble?
Creative and activist work. This is an event that we can do thanks to Dr. Melanie West, who will be moderating most of our conversation with Melinda Gebbie today. Melinda Gebbie, as I've just said, is a cartoonist, illustrator, painter, sculptor, innovator, and author of banned books. She's best known for contributing to women's comics, for authoring Lost Girls, and for the banned book Fresca Zizis. Melanie West, Ph.D. from UC San Diego, is an interdisciplinary artist, academic, and a Black comics artist from Rochester, New York. She teaches at Cal State, Los Angeles. Right? And Melanie has invited Dr. Yamuna Sangarasivam from Nazareth University, who is a professor of anthropology and director of women and gender studies, which is an important field to have to make conversations like this possible. If your institution has a women's and gender studies program, support it. Continue to be a patron of its programming and curriculum, and support scholars like Dr. Sangarasivam, who are bringing this mission to us at our different institutions. She's the author of Nationalism, Terrorism, Patriotism, a Speculative Ethnography of War. And I'm associate professor of English here, director of the Speculative Fiction and Cultures of Science program, which you can read more about at english.ucr.edu or sfcs.edu. ucr.edu. And you can follow on Instagram at UCR English or at Tinverse. I will put those in the chat so that people can follow us on social media. Zoom is being recorded, so please remain muted throughout the program. I will use the chat to moderate Q&A, but we want the audio and video to come from our speakers here and on Zoom. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. West.
Hello, everyone. It is so wonderful to be here with you all today, those physically present and those virtually present around the world for such an historic occasion, an international conversation with the legendary underground comics creator, Melinda Gebbie. It is my honor to start this event off today. We are going to begin with a brief lecture where I'm going to be introducing Melinda and particularly the historical context of her work, alongside a brief introduction on how Melinda and I made contact and I came to write the introduction of her book. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and we are going to get straight into it.
Screen share.
Just give it a moment. It's just lagging a little bit.
There we go. Okay. Progress.
Is it when it says click to add speaker?
That's not for us.
All right. Hello again. My name is Dr. Melanie West. I am an internationally published writer, illustrator, and cultural critic with a Ph.D. in ethnic studies. I again currently lecture at California State University, Los Angeles in the Pan-African Studies Department, and I run the webcomic titled Doom for Good. It is once again my honor to facilitate this interview with my dear friend, Melinda Gebbie. Today, we will celebrate her incredible life, her legacy, and her definitive art book, Melinda Gebbie's Greatest Fits. The book debuted in 2025 through the underground comics publisher Knockabout Press in London. But before we proceed to the interview, I will provide a brief lecture about Gebbie's work and how I came to write the introduction to her art book. In 1947, San Francisco saw the birth of Melinda Gebbie, who would rise to international fame in the underground comics movement. She became publicly known for her controversial work, including her comic Fresh Gazizis, banned in the UK, and her 3-volume graphic novel Lost Girls, made in collaboration with her husband, Alan Moore. Her work and legacy have been extensively discussed in the YouTube docuseries titled Bad Girl, Sad Girl, Mad Girl, Art of Melinda Gebbie. I strongly encourage watching all 3 videos as Gebbie speaks eloquently about her own work and motivations. Importantly, I also became aware of Gebbie when I watched this docuseries during my undergraduate years. The series had a profound impact on me. The videos made me an avid fan of Gebbie and underground comics and solidified my drive to be a comics creator myself. But most importantly, the Bad Girl, Sad Girl, Mad Girl series brought Melinda and I together. I made contact with Melinda in 2023 after completing my doctorate. I bought a copy of Freshkazizis on eBay as a graduation present to myself. I reached out to Melinda with a currently realized intention of interviewing her. We became pen pals. Eventually, she invited me to write the introduction to her art book. In our letters, she shared with me her vow to be an artist at age 8 and the fact that she has lived as a hidden epileptic. Her spinning figure on the cover of her art book demonstrates this condition, along with the undeniable fact that Melinda has always been a unique beast. Gebbie defies conventional categories as an artistic chameleon, ranging in neon colors, style variations, and infinite subject matter. Her work remains central to discourses around censorship, protest art, queer studies, feminist erotica, and countercultural movements. I invite us to understand Gebbie's portfolio through 3 categories: the political, the use of color, and the use of form. And on this slide, you can see here, this was in 2023 when I bought my copy of Freshkazizis, and the image in the middle is the book that we have all come together to celebrate, Melinda Gebbie's Greatest Fits. So, continuing, I invite us to consider her work through the 3 following categories: the political, the use of color, and the use of form. Although I would argue all 3 themes collide in much of the work and deeply inform one another, but considering them distinctly allows us to further illuminate the inherent complexity and range of Gebbie's work. Concerning the political, Gebbie's first political act manifested at the age of 8 when she vowed to dedicate her life to art and at the time disavowed marriage. Gebbie's profound self-possession would lead her to refuse the still life exercises of her early art teachers and boldly craft her own visual language, particularly through the medium of underground comics. Scholar Deborah Elizabeth Whaley states, quote, "The term comics," and that's comics with an X, refers to socially relevant underground and independent forms of comics, end quote. Scholar Rebecca Wasno argues, quote, "Early feminist comics were characterized by the sexual explicitness and taboo content typical of many underground comics, but a noticeable distinction was the privileging of women's experiences, political struggles, and pleasures," end quote. Wasno argues Lost Girls should be read as reminiscent of feminist cartoonists who intentionally depicted the taboo or obscene in order to address sexual and gender inequalities. Wasno asserts feminist comics relished a feminist grotesque and gleefully embraced fantasies of emasculating feminists. Such themes are present in Lost Girls, but also in Gebbie's prior comics. Specifically, in Debasement, depicts an alternative future in the year 2023, where a group of dominant women perform castration on a male captive. The shocking nature of the story provides a stage for cathartic female rage and inverts power dynamics experienced in historical, patriarchal sexual violence. This story was included in Gebbie's 1977 solo collection titled Freshkazizis, translated to Fresh Cocks in Italian. Melinda Gebbie states in her memoir, Freshkazizis, quote, "was meant to be a vaginocratic stab at the sexual outlook of men who considered women as something to be plundered. It turned the tables on the story of O and the writings of Marquis de Sade. Freshkazizis examined rape through a lens of action-based consecutive panels without words. At that time, rape was considered to be something which happened to women because they'd, left the stable door open, worn skirts that drove men to understandably wild behavior, or had awakened unfairly their out-of-control penises which, like guns once cocked, must be free to shoot passerby, end quote. Further, Dr. Woźno argues Gebbie's work illuminates the mundanity of sexual injury, acknowledging the pervasive reality of sexual trauma is important because it resists patriarchal scripts that brand survivors as broken. Processing the unfortunate but common occurrence of sexual violence presents an opportunity to destigmatize survivors and highlight the joyful possibility for community, pleasure, and healthy sexual practice that come from confronting and living forward with the trauma. Unfortunately, Gebbie's feminist erotica has experienced ongoing backlash. Fresh Kazizis remains banned in Britain on the grounds of obscenity due to its pornographic content. But that has not stopped Gebbie from generating political work. In a brilliant protest, she made an entire comic about her obscenity trial titled Public Enemy. Further, Gebbie has notably made impactful illustrations of central political figures, including Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. Melinda's vision of Reagan as a demon from hell emphasizes how she knew Reagan-era policies were going to have a ruinous impact on the nation. The portrait of Margaret Thatcher as the Greek god Kronos eating her own children and the comic Beryl's Fury were made in response to the 1984 to 1985 United Kingdom's miners' strike. Next, Gebbie's use of color has always been arresting. Her incredible painting, Girl Fight Club, highlights the impact of fauvism in her work, a movement that encouraged an intuitive relationship with color. In the YouTube docuseries, Gebbie states, "Color is a music you can use in silence, and if you use it effectively, it creates music in the mind's eyes and ears." I agree. The figures may battle in Girl Fight Club, but they are equally vibrating with a near kinetic rhythm in the psychedelic palette. The Luna series earns its name as its engagement with color illuminates the page and further highlights Gebbie's use of form. The series showcases the enraging, gorgeous, and complex journey of feeling trapped in the social and political construction of cisgender white womanhood on a psychological, and anatomical level. The first image states, Luna lives inside great anger as she is stuck within a body. Next, she is pummeled by voices like pistols in the second image and is bound by the anatomy of the ear canal. Signaling her autonomy is overcome and negotiated by external exposition. Luna is explicitly stuck within a vagina, and the series ends with her form ever more abstracted. As Luna's tongue sticks out, we see hints of Gebbie's epileptic condition, and in the frenzy of her contorted figure, we see how the identity of a life can be accented by the expectations of womanhood. Gebbie's use of form continues in the painting Et in Arcata Ego. We see three distinct forms depicting the reimagined night Gebbie was raped at age 18 and left for dead by a railway track. Gebbie tackles her trauma by reinventing the narrative of that night with a rescuing bicycle. A guardian angel sits at her back as a passenger, protecting Gebbie and directing her attention away from the perpetrator. Gebbie's body, thick and solid, flies forward, while the angel pulsates in long trendles of white, blue, purple, and faded pink. Inflamed in the protective purity of spirit, Gebbie races past her rapist, whose form disintegrates in the distance, breaking into literal particles of pointillism. The man's fatal power falls apart. Gebbie reclaims her corporeal dominion. I find this painting especially inspiring, as Gebbie and I are both survivors who have been failed on personal and formal levels, necessitating an artistic intervention to provide justice and support external forces cannot. Gebbie remains an extraordinary artist, writer, intellectual, and activist. In this last slide, I offer more images from Melinda's art book that were not discussed in this brief lecture, but certainly stand on their own. Further, alongside the upcoming release of the art book Melinda Gebbie's Greatest Bits, she has also written a comprehensive and compelling memoir. In the autobiography, We'll All Be Sorry When We're Dead, Gebbie paints with words and uses gorgeous, illustrative language to tell the story of her life and many adventures across several countries and incredible years. I am so humbled to say I am the first scholar to start reading this historic text, and I await its official publication with bated breath. It is now my honor to interview and turn our attention to the focal point of our event today, the absolutely singular Melinda Gebbie. So Melinda, how are you today?
I'm fine. I'm fascinated to be here. I really look forward to it. And thank you for the work that you've done and your enthusiasm and your wonderful insights. It's very, very nice to be here. Thank you, everyone.
We're so happy to share today with you. So, as you know, we have a series of about 11 questions that you were sent in advance to answer for today. So, I'm going to start with reading the first question. Is that all right? Okay. So, question number 1. In the book, The Right to Sex, Feminism in the 21st Century, Yamuna Sangarasivam, a professor at Oxford University, states, quote, feminism is not a philosophy or a theory or even a point of view. It is a political movement to transform the world beyond recognition. It asks, what would it be to end the political, social, economic, psychological, and physical subordination of women? It answers, we do not know. Let us try and see, end quote. So Melinda, my question for you is, do you agree with Professor Sangarasivam, and how would you define feminism?
You're asking me now?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. Well, how would I define it? I didn't really, I didn't study what was going on because I was caught up in a women's comics collective in the 70s. And so I experienced a lot of this through the collective and the way the women related to each other. And also things that were happening on the street in San Francisco. There was a lot of anger. The women, to a certain extent, some of the women directed that anger at other women in the collective, which I felt very strongly about because I felt we were all there to support each other, no matter what we were doing, to help each other. I'd looked for a community to be involved with. For a long time, I joined weird cults thinking that I'd have something in common with people. But I found the Women's Comics Collective to be, and there were women there who were divisive, petty, unkind, and to me, it didn't seem like they were talking about the things that were really upsetting for them. For instance, you didn't talk about rape. You didn't talk about abuse. You talked about how angry you were that these things were happening, but nobody would confide in each other in a supportive way so we could carry on and be creative and put more of ourselves into our stories. And there seemed to be a lot of need to be angry at men, but not to be able to talk to them in a way that helps people to listen. And so things didn't get resolved. There was just floating anger. There was obviously a lot of anger. I would take mine home and work on it with myself. What am I angry about? I'm not angry, you know. I found out what I was angry about. I developed a vocabulary of how to deal with it through my art. And I realized that it was an individual thing, that just because I felt this way or that way doesn't mean that everybody else did. But I had to get these feelings out of my system, because otherwise I'd hurt myself, I might hurt other people, you know, and it would all be for naught. So the feminism that I saw on the street there was because San Francisco has a very exotic population of, you know, people who are sexually very interesting, you know, men and women. And one of the things that disturbed me was that when I went with a friend, a gay woman friend, her name was Honey Lee, she very close person, cared a great deal about her. She invited me to a militant lesbian feminist meeting, and I brought a couple of my woman friends along, not thinking about, well, they have to be militant lesbian feminists in order to be invited. And when we got there, immediately somebody said, the woman who was announcing the meeting said, well, we've got 3 women here today who are obviously breeders. They're wearing lipstick, and we're not interested in having them here. And it sounded like a comic strip. It sounded like something you'd hear a comic person say, a comic character. So we didn't leave right away because, you know, I was kind of fascinated by the bizarreness of it. So they went on to talk very, very fondly of a woman named Joni, whose last name I can't remember, but Joni had a sex toys shop. And so they said, we're very grateful to Joni for her sex toy shop, even though she is a breeder. So it was kind of tiptoeing amongst eggs that really hadn't existed to me before. I mean, I was in my 30s. It wasn't like I was a young kid. But so my opinions of feminism, they're very emotional, but they're probably not very philosophically useful to trained minds who are studying. There were so many things about feminism, and I kind of saw the butt end of a lot of it. And I was, you know, it became a dirty word. When I came to England and started working at an animation company, TVC, I went for lunch with one of the key animators, and he said to me, "Are you one of those goddamn Marxist feminists?" And, you know, before I'd even spoken to him. So this was a kind of a wildfire of misdirected energy, as far as I could see, second wave feminism. And I consider myself a feminist because I do care about women, but I care about men as well. I care about the situation between both of them. and the new sort of situation with masculinism, I can't help but see it partly as a defense mechanism against what feminism was, as I experienced. And so I'm wary of political isms. You know, it's important.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think many of your insights relate specifically to intersectional feminism and considering the complexity of identity across multiple different populations and communities. If you wouldn't mind, Melinda, could I move to the second question then, which will continue much of what you're talking about? Okay, so the second question is, why is visual art central to your expression of feminism?
Sorry. Why is visual
art then central to your expression of feminism? As again, your comic Freshka Zizi specifically, right, was an incredibly wonderful and innovative visual feminist text that once again subverted a lot of violent patriarchal notions around sex and gender expression and provided a voice for many silenced women, particularly those who have been abused.
Sorry, there's a lot of elements in that.
Sorry. So I'm just saying, why did visual art, right, become an important political tool for you, for your expression? Why is visual art so important to your expression?
Well, I started drawing when I was about 7 or 8. And, the home environment was, both my parents worked. My mother was a very, very angry, frustrated woman. And when she got home from work, she was tired. She was an older woman. And, you know, she'd wait till she got home so she could properly scream. And that was a daily activity as long as I was living at home. And so I'd go into my little room and I'd draw my own world. And when I was about 13, I was drawing a story about teenagers. When I was younger, it was about kids. It was a way of connecting with myself in a way that pleased me and didn't upset my mother. A private little world, which meant everything to me. I couldn't, I don't think, have really managed the world very well without finding art as a way to speak to myself and see what I thought and just feel the world. You know, I went outside. I loved nature. We lived in a very nice, beautiful town with redwood trees. I couldn't wait to get outside. I never liked staying at home, but when I was home, I was drawing. When I was out, I was identifying with nature. So it was excruciatingly important that I could draw. And I got my drawing talent from my father, who had to do his drawing in the basement because my mother needed all the territory she could have when she got home to express her anger. And also, I think I inherited something, her personal trauma, which I think leads into this, because when she was a small child, her parents were in a very early car crash in 1913, and they were crashed into by a train, and both her parents were beheaded. And I think that contributed to her incredible anger. I think at that time, when I was starting to do my book, We'll All Be Sorry When We're Dead, I started thinking about how trauma can be inherited. And it definitely can. All sorts of things can be inherited genetically.
So my third question, oh, so sorry, Melinda.
Sure.
My third question to you is, the back cover of Melinda Gebbie's Greatest Fits features a vivid portrait of the birth of William Blake, an image that is part of a series of portraits of William Blake in the book. William Blake is an English poet, painter, and printmaker from the 18th and early 19th century. He received little recognition during his lifetime, passed away in obscurity, and was perceived as eccentric. What significance does William Blake represent for you and your legacy as an artist?
When I first came to London, I was fascinated by Soho. William Blake's house was in the area that I was looking at. The sun was shining bright. You know, there was just a feeling about Soho and the surrounding area. And of course, since you know, when you come to England, if you haven't grown up there, everybody knows about William Blake, because he's affected the whole creative atmosphere of England. You might not see his influence so much now, but his archetypal images of God and angels and his complete involvement with radical politics, his absolute bravery, and also for any aspiring artist, the fact that he produced all this beautiful work and never sold anything. He had one supporter, an artist named Fuseli, who was doing very well with his painting. And he did have acolytes toward the end. And of course, his wonderful support system was his wife, Catherine. And I think, whether we know very little about her, she is his heroic woman. It's a shame that there's no statue of her along with him. But yes, Blake was the bravest and died the poorest of any artist you can think of. And yet his attitude was that he didn't mind about his physical situation, because he knew that the angels loved everything he did, and that was all he cared.
That's such a beautiful story, especially about self-validation when you're experiencing a moment in which your work is not being widely acknowledged. What a beautiful answer. So my next question is, on the cover of Melinda Gebbie's Greatest Fits, you draw yourself as a spinning figure to embody the epileptic condition you've been navigating throughout your life and that has been largely unknown to the general public. In your memoir, We'll All Be Sorry When We're Dead, you also acknowledge that epilepsy and seizures have importantly been interpreted as signs of divinity and cosmic insight associated with shamanism. How do you interpret your own epileptic condition, and how has it impacted your life as an artist?
Well, it didn't seem to help anything at the time. I was 14 when I had my first seizure in French class, and my French teacher and I actually hated each other. I used to watch him through my bracelet. It was an asinine thing to do, but it's just something to annoy him. And then, you know, this dramatic thing happened, and I think the nurse rushed in and said, "Oh, stand back, everybody, it's Grand Mal." Yeah, I'm sure the kids in my high school all knew it, and nobody asked me about it. It was, I think, a biological kind of electro dysfunction. But I'd usually have the seizures when I was upset. And I suppose it was a language also with my mother, because if I had a seizure, she'd stop yelling at me and say things like, "You're going to kill me, aren't you, with all this?" You know. So how did it affect me? Well, naturally, I started reading Dostoevsky. You know, and yeah, you know, since then I've met people who have, you know, problems with narcolepsy and things like that. And I think the common thing I hear is that people just cope with it themselves. I mean, it's not something you talk about as a subject. And because of that, when I had boyfriends, you know, I would be in a overexcited state, and several times I'd wake up and see the look of horror on someone's face and say, "Oh my God, looks like you were wrestling with, like, you know, Jacob wrestling with the angels." You know, that was a complimentary thing to say. Somebody else said, "I think I'm going to be sick," you know. So, you know, but generally I didn't tell people because I figured I wouldn't have a social life if I did. Does that answer anything?
That so many wonderful insights were provided in just that alone. So our next question is, you collaborated on the boldly subversive and historically vital book, Reagan for Beginners, with David Smith in 1984. This text explicitly illustrates the impact of Reagan-era policies and documents how conservatives harm the most vulnerable populations and elements within our borders and beyond, including women, children, the working class, racial minorities, and the environment. The text states, quote, "The present flight from liberalism personified by Reagan in the US consists of a general trend in Western nations away from the welfare state, away from services for the disabled, elderly, and unemployed, away from guns and butter liberalism. Reagan, Thatcher, and Kohl are virtually carbon copies, conservatives in triplicate," end quote. Considering this quote, do you think the Trump administration represents another part of this legacy? And how do you think these politics have heightened under our current administration?
I think the masks are off. I think everybody does what they feel like in politics. Um, you know, you would know that quite well living in America. Um, oh, yeah, I don't think any politicians bother to lie anymore. Because first of all, they're going to be found out now that we have a worldwide electronic gossip system. You can't keep a secret for very long. Nobody can. And now that the news is out about what these people are like, um, all that's left for us to do is fight them.
Yes, absolutely right. So my next question is, if we were living in a world regulated by integrity instead of greed, what do you think that world would look like?
Well, I suppose that's one reason why I like science fiction. um, I do read a lot of things that you know, are difficult. I can't read as many as I used to because I like a bit of a break. Because I've just forgotten what my point was. Oh, a lovely world. Well, it's perfectly possible. But change has to come from within, doesn't it? You know, um, I've had to work on myself to make myself more social and kinder and more reasonable and to listen more and to have more empathy. We don't necessarily get these as an education in the home, so we have to self-educate. We learn from people who have friends and who work with each other and who are communally oriented and who care about what happens to all of us who are being ignored by capitalism and its ugly machinery and its throwaway system of humanity. I'm hoping that we will have some changes. I'd like to mention a politician that I hope will win out in this election. But I don't know any of these people personally. I have no idea where it's going. However, I think the good news is that young people are speaking their minds, as the song goes, and they're talking to each other about everything that's important to them, their sexuality, the world, what they feel is missing, what they want to happen, how much it all disturbs them. And their minds are fresh and they have passion and they are working towards self-empowerment, which doesn't harm anyone else. You know, I love what the trans community are doing. I love what young people are doing to try to connect on a serious plane with other people at a much earlier age than we ever tried. When I was in my 20s or 18, you know, I just wanted to have a good time. I wanted to go out, get stoned, you know, get drunk, go to the beach, have experiences. These young people are much more serious and their sensitivities are much more acute. And I hate to be an older person who says, well, the young will fix it, you know, but God bless them.
We're glad you believe in us.
Of course I do.
Okay, so then my next question is, what advice would you give to young and emerging artists today?
Let's see. Where are we? I did take some notes because I wanted to be coherent. What would I? The way I've written this, okay. Advice would I give to young people today? Stick with what you love. I mean, William Blake is an example. I'm not saying go for starvation. I'm saying stick with what you love because that's the most important thing. Out in the world, we are cogs in the machinery. We are replaceable parts. You can't be replaceable if you're creative. Whatever you do, find something that you love and make it grow. And you can see how happy very wealthy people are. You can see that, can't you? They've got their furniture to keep them warm. They've got their trips to go on where they can sneer at people from cultures they don't understand or that they look down on. And that's the whole purpose of traveling, isn't it, when you're rich? You want to be human. Care about being human.
Sorry. My next question. Oh, so sorry.
Okay.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm so sorry. You continue, Melinda.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say things like, you know, get into community projects. That is really nice. You share while you create and while you grow. We used to have fanzines and they were important, you know, self-made things that you can do alone or with others and say, we did this and it's alive and it means something to us and it might mean something to you and it would all help.
So now my next question is, as our current event indicates, Melinda Gebbie's Greatest Fits will be a pivotal text in academia across disciplines including English, visual arts, history, anthropology, and women and gender studies. Considering this, what do you hope readers, scholars, and students learn from your legacy? Oh, you're okay. You were frozen for a second.
Yes.
Considering this, what do you hope the readers, scholars, and students learn from your legacy?
That the great project of being human is being human. Life is a miracle. Why isn't everything that we do miraculous? We must remember how extraordinarily unbelievable it is to be alive, to be able to do anything we want, especially if it's helpful rather than destructive.
Beautiful. So now this question is from Professor Andre. Do you see your fine art drawings and paintings engaged in storytelling the way that your comics do? And how different is a painting from a panel in a comic?
Can refer to the notes here. Because both a panel in a comic and a painting tell stories in different ways. A panel in a comic is part of a sequence, and the meaning is not apparent until that sequence is completed. A single image on a canvas is telling a whole story at once, and it's not read sequentially, nor in a linear fashion. Instead, we absorb the totality of the image, and from that, we deduce what it's trying to tell us.
Very powerful. So last, before we turn over our conversation to our other collaborators and our guests, is there anything else that you would like to share with the world today, Melinda?
I'm just happy to be here and be in conversation with everybody. This is wonderful. I can't think of anything else I really have to say, except it's great to be with you all. Everyone who's watching, everyone who's contributing, thank you so much.
We share the same sentiment. I'm going to turn it over now to you, Professor Carrington.
You. Oh, thanks. Oh, thank you so much. So,
Question for you.
yeah, I wanted to bring Dr. Sangarasivam into the conversation. Could you unmute your mic? Should be able to. Let's see. I think I can unmute you as a host. Oh, good. Oh, great. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm well,
Great.
thank you, Andre, Melanie, Melinda. I'm so happy and so honored to join you in this wonderful conversation. Congratulations, Melinda, on your extraordinary legacy and on your extraordinary work.
Oh, thanks so
Thank you,
much.
Jill. It's a privilege to talk to you as well. You and Andre. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask Yamuna, if I may, how you see as an artist and a practitioner, how you see an art form like comics fit alongside the range of modes of expression that women and feminists use around the world. Just, if you have seen comics and drawings and zines play a part in communities that you've observed and researched, and just how you see different kinds of artistic expression fitting into people's responses to nationalism, people's responses to colonialism and their feminist movements.
Absolutely. Andre, thank you so much for your question. Melinda, as you've spoken so beautifully in response to Melanie, your wonderful questions, your art, Melinda, is in conversation with many artists around the world, and more specifically, feminist artists as well, where your art and your writing teaches us how to practice living forward, as Melanie, you spoke in your introduction, while confronting multiple forms of trauma emerging from multiple forms of colonization and structures and practices of power and domination. I think that your work speaks to the importance, again, as Melanie, you said, of artistic interventions that addresses humanity's wrongs. So I see, Andre, I see, Melinda, your work as intersecting with the work of feminist artists, particularly Black feminist artists like Audre Lorde, Zora Neale Hurston, who's an artist and anthropologist, M. Norsby Phillips, Kara Walker, and also I'm finding connections between your work, your speculative work, and also your work of confronting trauma with the writings of Vanessa Mercado de Oliveira. She writes a book in her book, Hospicing Modernity, Facing Humanity's Wrongs and the Implications of Social Activism. She writes about the practice of worlding worlds. And if I may quote from her writing, and I'm making the connection between art and comics as a practice of worlding. And Mercado de Oliveira writes, worlding stories, which is what I understand and I witness in your work, Melinda. You're worlding stories with your artwork, as you spoke in your responses to Melanie's questions of your understanding as an artist. So worlding stories are not focused on only aesthetic perfection of form, but the integration of form and movement, whether it's movement of one's body, one's spirit, one's politics, one's sense of identity, movement from experiences of trauma, movement from experiencing various forms and realizing various forms of power and agency, particularly from those difficult experiences of trauma that is and perhaps has always been a part of everyday life, and therefore becomes a part of the ordinary rather than the extraordinary. So I think that artists like M. Norsby Phillips, who through her poetry writes about the historical trauma of the experience of the slavery and forced migration in the most dehumanizing and painful ways, and meaningfully, as you were speaking, Melinda, particularly about your first encounters with feminism as a young artist in San Francisco, you talked about how you felt a sense of how you felt how it felt to be an outsider when you were hoping to meet people who were like-minded and who to join in solidarity, because that was what was being that was the marketing sort of second wave feminism and the feminists that you encounter. But in fact, what you experienced was a kind of a form of violence that by naming you as a breeder, that was extraordinary. What a story you shared of being named as a breeder. And you know, as a dehumanizing practice. Audre Lorde talks about this in her writing in one of her essays called that she titles "Eye to Eye," and I'm just going to take this opportunity to read from Audre Lorde. She says, often we give lip service to the idea of mutual support and connection between Black women because we have not yet crossed the barriers of these responsibilities. She's talking about the responsibilities of support and understanding and care. Not fully explored the angers and fears that keep us from realizing the power of a real Black sisterhood. So Melinda, what you experienced and what you experienced in that moment of the feminist art collective, and also of the lesbian art collective, that kind of it's not just exclusion, but it's a form of it's an exercise of power. I think your responses in your artwork, in the form and and Melanie, your analysis of the use of form and color, and the politics of your representation of how we are called to witness the realities that that you've experienced, but also you allow us to experience our own lived traumas through your artwork. And I think, Andre, that's a foundational and principal form of moment of intersection, in response to your question of the work of art, the practice of art, and also the role of art in our lives.
Oh, thank you so much. That's just fantastic. I love that this generates other dialogue between you two. I wonder, Yamuna, if you have a question for Melinda that you would like to raise.
So one of the questions that emerges for me as I witness your artwork, Melinda, you invite us into a really radical journey into our bodies. Your work is like jumping on a powerful spaceship, not to travel into outer space, but to really travel into my own body and into my own psyche. And my question to you is, how do you do that? How do you travel into your inner world, into your body through your
That's a
art?
beautiful question. Wow, that's a great question. It's something that I'm tempted to say something I just do, but it must be a process. I do love studying organic things. I mean, Ernst Haeckel's books of beautiful one-celled creatures, just how beautiful the organs are within human beings, the fantastic constructions, it's just incredible when you look at it. When I started doing anatomical drawings, from like Gray's Anatomy and the right sympathetic nerve system and stuff like that, and I thought, we are incredible towers of exquisite miracles. And yet we go around thinking, oh, well, it's just, can my hands do this? Can my feet do this? And things like that. But we are carrying these amazing, what's the word? Sheaths of miracle. Every single living thing is a miracle. And it's all important to know it. And when you look into the organisms around you, if you turn it towards yourself and think, well, like I've done some early drawings, I think in the 70s, of myself covered in like little things that look like one-celled animals and starfishes and things like that, because our living energy is so profound, and we just forget that we are in miracle time. And it's not just about what somebody's smile is like. What is that creature inside? What does that person look like inside when they're feeling this and that? Do colors change inside like octopuses? You know, do we work camouflages that people can't see inside our heads? It's all up for grabs. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm glad I made you laugh and smile. You've got a beautiful smile.
I'm just ecstatic. I'm just ecstatic with your response and your analysis. We forget we are in miracle time. Melinda, your artwork invites us into miracle time. And it's just so beautiful. And also that you, as I'm understanding from your sharing your process of studying human anatomy and studying the anatomy of living organisms, and splicing organic life, like intersecting organic life into the human body, where this is a very Hindu cosmological perspective that the cosmos lives within each living being and is reflected in each living being, from the most minute element of hydrogen and oxygen and so on, and into the ways that our bodies function at this extraordinary, miraculous level. It's really so wonderful for us to be reminded that we do live in miracle time. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. That was a wonderful conversation. I will cherish it.
If I may continue, should I? So sorry, my audio got messed up as I was trying to. My mic unmuted, and then okay, I'm still getting on your laptop. Okay, I had to mute the mic on my laptop. So sorry for those technical difficulties. Another thing that I just wanted to add about Melinda's incredible work and the insights that you've provided here today is that I think that your work also encourages us to be comfortable with difference and to get comfortable even with the discomfort that it can provide. And so going back to the story that you shared about the women's group, I first want to state that I think it is absolutely viable and should be encouraged if lesbians want lesbian-only spaces. That's not the issue. But when what you described in the story, the friends that you attended the meeting with, one, you were invited by another member of the group, but two, when they had issues with the other two women, they specifically stated that they were wearing lipstick. They didn't ask what they identified as. And I say that as a queer woman that is currently wearing lipstick. So that's just to add to the point that Professor Sangarasivam gave, specifically also importantly in relation to Audre Lorde, who is a very famous out lesbian and also had multiple children. So our identities, right, often can converge, as I said after your question, with multiple different lived experiences. And your story, I think, importantly, offers us to consider the ways in which we are seeking solidarity in community with others and how that solidarity is going to necessitate us to have a sophisticated relationship with difference, which is what Audre Lorde also specifically preached. She had a very pivotal essay where she talked about the importance of difference and the importance of organizing around difference and embracing difference as a central paradigm for building more constructive community. And so I think that your work also provides a very important platform to think about the complexity of identity, because again, there's so many ways to manifest as a queer woman, and particularly as a lesbian. And again, Audre Lorde was ironically a lesbian breeder. And so again, I just wanted to offer that to say that I think that your work really encourages us to have a really radical relationship with identity, difference, and the complexity of the form.
Thanks so much.
Whatever makes you happy, whatever encourages love and understanding. Nobody should have to fight about who they are. Just accept it and enjoy it and be yourself and connect with others in their differentness. And, you know, it's like I've only read one book in my life, and that's it. I've read the one book. I know about books. I don't need to know any more. It's that kind of, you know, attitude that, you know, gets you nowhere. Yeah.
A question from the audience on Zoom is from Alan Rankin. Hi, Alan.
Okay.
His question, Melinda, is who are some of your artistic influences in comics from when you were a young artist, or any comics artists you mentioned today?
Oh, well, I was looking at comics pages in the San Francisco Chronicle when I was a kid, and I loved Gus Ariola's artwork. Gordo, his character was called, and it was beautiful artwork, and it was a really lovely sort of ongoing story about life in Mexico, and he had a little cat, and there was a little boy that visited him, but these stories were so warm and so beautiful to look at. Al Cap, his personal politics were dodgy, but he was a very good artist, and I enjoyed his comics. Pogo was wonderful. You know, so I liked stories that were beautifully drawn and that had a humane kind of quality to them and had a point to them. And all the ones I've named were beautiful and had a point to them. You know, they were quietly humane, you know. So, and then when I got a little bit older to be a teenager, I was crazy about Mad Magazine. Harvey Kurtzman was a huge hero to me. Brilliant man, wonderful artist, very nice man too. I was lucky enough to meet him. Yeah, teenager. Yeah. Wally Wood, another Mad Magazine cartoonist. Will Elder. I got into liking little Annie Fanny in Playboy magazine because she was so beautifully drawn, and I thought it was sweet and poignant that she always seemed to be surprised, and she never understood exactly why she was naked, but she never bothered to worry about it. So I liked her natural attitude.
Thanks. I love that. It occurs to me to ask also, Melinda, before you joined Women's Artists Collective, were you aware of women who were cartoonists? Or did you just sort of start making your work and meet other people doing it?
Good question. Well, I got involved with the Women's Comics Collective because I went to Golden Gate Park. There was a publishers fair, and I met a very nice woman who's a very good cartoonist, Lee Mars.
Yeah, Lee Mars. Oh, wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Lee said, I said, can any woman, you know, join these comics? And because she was kind of standing for women's comics, looking for other women to join. And she said, yeah, you could join. You know, just come on down to where we meet. And she said, the pay isn't much, but who cares? You know, and I thought, great. This is like getting my calling cards everywhere. And most importantly, the work was uncensored.
Yeah.
What sold me on it. I didn't care if I got paid. I just wanted to, get my yayas out.
I love that. I got to know, or I have gotten to know Jen Camper a bit over the past few years, and she really has educated me and introduced me to other women cartoonists like Trina Robbins and Mary Wings, and Lee Mars in particular as a person to introduce you to this material is so great because her comic Pudge Girl Blimp is just
Oh,
such,
yeah.
it's such a great strip to know that it happened, to see the sort of the imagery of her body and sexual pleasure and just depicting a woman who identifies herself as fat and enjoys her body. I see so much of that in your comics that I'm so glad to have in this book, because you depict people with such different bodies and you really depict this appreciation for other people's artistic styles. I see in many of the comics in the collection, you draw cartoonists in the style of their artwork, and you draw some of the figures in
Yeah.
the comics in their style. I recognize the Diane DeMassa right off the bat, and it's so wonderful to see that conversation between you just in the drawing styles.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I really love doing that. I really liked synthesizing other people's work and kind of sometimes using it a bit against them, but you know,
Yes,
all's
yes,
fair
it works
in
both
love
ways.
and caricature.
Exactly. A question from Julia Brown in the audience. Hello, Melinda, she says. She said she'd love to hear your sense of how opportunity for women in the comics field overall has evolved over time. Do you think the mainstream has opened up to more subversive work, or do you still sense hesitation?
Ah, well, I haven't been keeping up with what's going on in comics for the last, probably since COVID. I've just been concentrating on my own work. So I'm not really the best person to ask. I hope things have opened up. I hope women are doing more stories about what really concerns them. And I have noticed, and this isn't exactly part of your question, but I have been concerned seeing that a lot of people who do political cartoons have been hushed by governmental edicts, and people have felt endangered about speaking their minds artistically where politics are concerned. I'm, you know, I would like more information on what women are doing. When I went to comics conventions in other parts of the world, I would always collect comic books from the other countries, and a lot of times I didn't understand the language, but I'd buy them if the artwork, affected me. But that doesn't mean that I learned a lot about politics, because I think a fair amount of comics, and I'm not talking, there's still the only place where I know that there is a flourishing comics community of women is in Malmo in Sweden, where they actually give awards to women comics artists that they appreciate and who have done something that people really care about. And they have a comics school in Malmo as well. But that's been the happiest young group of women cartoonists that I've ever seen. They were recognized, they were respected, and they seem to be, they're getting awards, they're getting attention. I actually asked if I could lecture there at one point, and I got a response saying, well, we don't need anybody except in the dead of winter. Are you interested in coming up
Right.
then? I said, no, I don't think so.
Makes sense.
Much as I'd like to to do it, but
Yamuna,
sorry.
could I ask you, how have you observed women artists and activists dealing with censorship in your research?
You know, this is I was about to ask the same question to Melinda, actually, in terms of how do we deal with censorship? I think that again, as you have seen, as you have seen, Melinda, that women artists and across gender, across the gender boundaries, when we are faced with censorship, many artists will go underground. The concept of fugitivity, that remind me who, Andre and Melanie, it just escaped my mind. Who writes on fugitivity?
Saidiya Hartman?
Saidiya Hartman and Black male writer.
Fred Moten, probably.
Fred Moten. I'm thinking about Fred Moten. So I think the politics of fugitivity speak well to how we are dealing with censorship as artists, as academics, as political activists, as scholars, where institutional life, and I think this is where the work of Mercado de Oliveira in what she's talking about, hospicing modernity, is we're seeing the limitations of white supremacist liberal capitalist structures, capitalist systems that structure what we live as democracy, or the limitations of such a democracy. And that increasingly in these political times, which is not that far off or different from pre-World War II, 1930s, and during the McCarthy era, each wave of censorship that we face as society as a whole, nationally and internationally, mobilizes artists and academics and writers and activists to create those fugitive spaces. But the question and the struggle and the challenge is, how do we sustain solidarities? That would be my question to Melinda, is that, as we struggle against censorship, as we struggle against, the oppressive forces of silencing political dissent through artwork, through writing, through teaching, historically, it's been a challenge to sustain solidarity because of this demand for belonging, to adhere to a particular way of thinking or a way of being in order to belong. And if you don't do that, then you don't belong. And so, so Melinda, in your experience as an artist, Andre, if I may use your question as a springboard to ask Melinda, how can you advise us from your work as an artist that has confronted not only different forms of trauma, but also the trauma that comes out of trying to build solidarities? How can you advise us as to what would you like to see in the future of how to maintain solidarities, how to sustain solidarities, Melinda? Particularly through art.
I will tell you a little very short story of something to do with the dynamic of that. it's in the art book. It's a drawing of my friend Paul Mavridis, and he's screaming. And the title is I Can't Do Anything. And it appeared in the San Francisco Chronicle in the pink section, an advert from a show. And a woman got in contact with me and said that she was a teacher of kids with special emotional problems. And she took those kids to that show because of that picture. And she said it was a relief for them because somebody had drawn a picture of someone screaming. That's, I mean, the scream, that painting in he come from Copenhagen, I forget, Edvard Munch. And that's one of the most important paintings that's ever been done by a human being. The other, I think, is Van Gogh's Sunflowers. But that says to me, if you express pain in paintings, and, I mean, do it honestly. I don't mean like the classical paintings where everything looks kind of like some strange form of poetry, and it's all to be observed from an overview. But if you go in close and you do things that say, I hurt, I'm lonely, I'm frightened, I don't feel I belong, and if you make them with your own heart, the heart will connect. It makes you feel less alone to create, and it makes you feel connected to others, even if you don't see them and meet them, because you're putting out your messages in a bottle, and someone who needs that message will find it. I always thought when I was busy doing my artwork late at night, years ago in San Francisco, and I thought, it doesn't matter if I'm not recognized in my life. This is not what it's about. Taking a, bit like Blake, I guess, the main thing is do it. It will take care of itself. Even if it doesn't, you've done what you believe in. So solidarity, it can be like long distance signals, like, the World Wide Web. You show things, people get back to you. I mean, Melanie and myself, bless her, she contacted me. Otherwise, I would have never known that I had such a wonderful potential friend. So we advertise our hearts with our creativity. And that's part of how we draw others to us. And once we've connected, because that thing was truthful and was saying, have you seen this? What do you feel? Tell me how you feel about life. Connectedness. And if we do it creatively, then it means we really mean it. It isn't just a conversation in a pub.
Yes.
We spent time trying to connect.
Yes. Thank you.
Is that helpful?
Yes, very much so. Thank you. Thank you.
I can't think of a more constructive, inspiring note to finish on. Thank you all for this conversation. This is fantastic. I just posted in the chat, look out for a link to video from this event on the @UCR English Instagram, and we'll post or email links to panelists, of course, so that you can access it once we put it somewhere online. You can see. Melanie, do you have anything to say to wrap us up?
Thank you so much to our participants who came here today to watch this historic event live, both physically and virtually. We are so grateful to experience this with you. Of course, thank you so much to our collaborators, Dr. Andre Carrington, who provided the platform for us here at UCR this morning in California, this afternoon on the East Coast, and this evening in the UK. And thank you, of course, all of the thank yous to the incredible blessing, the diamond in the rough, the perpetual legend, Melinda Gebbie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Yamuna. Thank you, Andre. Thank you for a wonderful, wonderful, unforgettable conversation. All
Thanks
of you.
so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you
And
so
thank you to Professor Dr. Sangarasivam, the director of the Women and Gender Studies Department at Nazareth University. Surely not forgotten. Your contributions were absolutely pivotal and were the backbone of our insight on feminism here today.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you so
all
much.
so much.